Golf Central. Brought to you by Titleist.
We start with some big news. The R&A and USGA announcing a couple big changes today that will impact how the rules of golf are applied immediately. Welcome into Golf Central. George Savarickas with Lisa Cornwall.
Yeah, George, but many people are wondering or questioning rather whether they go far enough to make a real impact. We'll dive into that in just a moment. Right now, let's dive into the changes. The first one is a reasonable judgment standard. It applies when a player determines a spot, point, position, line, area, distance, or other location in applying the rules. This recognizes that a player should not be held to the degree or precision that can be sometimes provided only by video technology.
As long as the player does what can reasonably be expected under the circumstances to make an accurate determination. The player's reasonable judgment will be accepted and no penalties assessed, even if later shown to be wrong by the use of video evidence.
Currently, as the rules are written, they're black and white. And we could end up with a scenario where a player is trying to do the right thing in replacing their ball or in proceeding under another rule, and video evidence shows that they got it wrong and just a little bit wrong. And for us, that is a cause of concern, and that is what this decision is going to address. And so moving forward, if these scenarios happen, again, it's going to be up to each committee and each given circumstance to address and answer the question. But it will provide them with an additional tool to say, look, the player's operating reasonably, the player's doing everything correctly, and the only reason we're aware of this evidence is because it was seen on television.
The decision does suggest that in a number of cases that it would be appropriate to talk to the player, to have a full and frank discussion with them so that they understand the questions that they're asking, and on a case-by-case basis make a decision as to whether they are satisfied that the player has done the best job they can, even if they have missed their 100% accurate replacement mark by a small way.
Second rule change can be called the naked eye standard. It applies when only the use of video technology identifies things that could not be reasonably seen with the naked eye. An example includes a player who unknowingly touches a few grains of sand in taking a backswing with a club in a bunker when making a stroke.
If the committee concludes that such facts could not reasonably have been seen with the naked eye and the player was not otherwise aware of the potential violation, the player will be deemed to have not breached the rules even when the video technology shows otherwise. No penalty will be assessed.
Is a decision that's immediately available that's going to address standards that essentially will no longer hold players that are on television to a higher standard than others playing the game. And what I mean by that is if there's factual evidence that can only become available through the use of television evidence, we recognize that is essentially holding those players to a higher standard, and that's what this decision is going to do.
The whole purpose is to ensure, as best we can, an equal playing field. In other words, if it would have been seen by the player or somebody right next to the player, that's what the game has had for decades, for centuries. And players are expected to call penalties on themselves and apply the rules properly. So what we're trying to do is to isolate enhanced video technology, which gives you additional information that wouldn't otherwise be available.
The LPGA released this statement today. We are pleased that the USGA and R&A expedited this important decision concerning the rules of golf. We applaud their effort to provide further guidance in these areas and bring changes to the game so quickly.
We are also encouraged that the governing bodies will continue to vet the rules through a collaborative working group, which includes the LPGA, regarding information from outside sources and, in particular, information received via viewer call-ins and emails after a round has been deemed official by the Rules Committee. Here's what some of the players on the PGA and LPGA tours had to say about these changes.
As golfers, it's the only sport where we are, expected to police ourselves, and we all know if a ball moves. And I'd like to think that every single player would call themselves on something like that if it happened. And I think it's the integrity of our game that's important to us, and so I like the rule change.
The decisions kind of just put more cloud up in the air. It's really going to come up to the discretion of rules officials, and it's going to require players to make sure they're honest and, could potentially maybe lead to cheating or who knows what. I just feel like it opens up a whole nother can of worms, and I just feel like there's other things they could have addressed kind of pertaining to the Alexi situation that would have made more of a difference.
For years it's been, no, we only write rules every 4 years, and they sit around a table and they drink gin and tonics and they decide that this is the way golf's supposed to be without really using any real world examples. So really pro golf is good like that because it's visible. If you see something that's kind of not fair or unjust, either way, good or bad for the player, and it doesn't seem to make sense, changing it, sitting around changing it pretty quickly while it's fresh in everyone's mind so you get the right change. It's happened twice in the last 6 or 9 months. That's the process I like.
I think when you deal with like naked eye and video, that's going to be such a fine line. It's going to be so hard to decide what is what. And you're going to have a lot of disagreements with that, but just rule number one, do away with call-ins. Nobody can call in, you know, players or the rules officials can do it, and then you have to do away with the scorecard infraction, seeing as she didn't know she had a penalty at the time of signing the card.
I think it's incredible to see them taking immediate action. I believe the USGA, Mike Davis, what he's doing with the United States Golf Association is awesome. I believe he is really trying to make the game a better game, and that's what the organization should be doing.
Here's one example where the naked eye rule would have possibly changed the outcome of a professional event. During a 3-hole aggregate playoff in the 2016 U.S. Women's Open between Anna Nordquist and Brittany Lang, the players learned on the final playoff hole that Nordquist was being assessed a 2-stroke penalty for touching the sand with her club in a fairway bunker during her takeaway on the hole prior. This was only verified by zooming into the video in slow motion after the fact, something the naked eye standard would not have allowed. Anna Nordquist posted this reaction on her social media today. I'm happy with the new rules, changes by the USGA and RNA decision regarding infractions that cannot be seen with the naked eye. After my experience last year at the U.S. Women's Open at Quarterball, I know firsthand the impact that the advancements in technology can have on potential rulings. As I said, following the round, I made a mistake and I take full responsibility for it. I am happy that going forward, this will no longer be an issue.
All right, now joined by Golf Channel contributor Matt Adams, Golf Channel insider Tim Rosafort for more reaction from the changes we've heard. Your initial impressions of what came about today?
I think it's a direction, not a destination with what took place so far today. They addressed the intent of what a player is doing and why a player is doing it. And I think it's important, we were talking before we went on the air, that this is a rule that's going to affect all of golf. It's not just what happens on the tours, although on the tours is where these things take place that cause this massive flashpoint to say something needs to change. And in this case, with the Lexi Thompson rule specifically, the committee would have had an option to go back to Lexi and say, what happened here? Instead of it being black and white and then being forced to blindly assess a penalty, what they didn't address, and that's what you heard a number of the players discussing there, particularly Stacey Lewis, was they didn't address how the information was delivered, meaning that it may have come in from an outside source. We were inclined, I don't know whether it was an email or was it a phone call. It's still unclear to me how they were contacted. That was not addressed, nor was that statute of limitations. At what point when you sign your scorecard is it done? Is it set in stone? And that's the end of it. So there are still some pieces to this thing that they've said they have a working group that they're going to address, but as yet they haven't figured it out.
Decisions, right? I mean, you think that this was going to be a simpler way of understanding where we are with the rules of golf. You try to dumb this thing down, and I think if you read all the reaction to it and the statements from the USGA, you may come away a little bit more confused than you were before. Hopefully, ultimately, this is just a start in this process and not the final stage of it. And then ultimately, it's going to be, we're going to know whether this works or not when it comes down to the point where the next Anna Nordquist does that, the next Dustin Johnson has a ball move on him. I think Stacey Lewis, of all the reaction I heard tonight, was the most spot on, because I think there's still a lot of clouds here. This is not a clear way of determining, you know, what's fair and what's not fair in these situations that we've witnessed over the last less than a year now.
Well, the one area that they did directly address is this area that when video technology comes into play. Take, for example, in 2010, Peter Hansen, European Tour. He's on the fringe of the green. He has a wedge in hand, and he's going to hit the shot. Here's the video from it. There is absolutely no way that he could have known that after he made the initial impact on the ball, it went down into that grass and came back up and grazed the bottom of the wedge. The only way they knew that that happened was by super slow-mo following, showing the ball coming back up. He said he couldn't even feel it happening. So this is where the rule is trying to address areas where it is imperceptible by a human being to say enough.
Let's do a quick follow here. Did they do enough with the first step? Yes or no?
No.
First step, yeah, but let's see it in action. Let's see a situation occur, and then we can make the final say as to whether
it's too late to judge it all the way.
Or it's too early to judge.
I mean, too early. Too early to judge it all the way. Yeah, I mean, it was. I wish they had done more with the other areas, but they said they're working on it.
I think a lot of people in the golf world wish there was a little further, especially when it comes to viewers being able to email or call
Doesn't make it right for Lexi, doesn't make it right for
Totally agree.
Northwest,
An infraction was committed.
And the Dustin Johnson situation didn't really impact whether he won the Open or not, just added a lot of drama to an already dramatic Open.
Definitely. All right, Lisa.
As Matt mentioned just moments ago, the USGA and R&A are teaming up with the PGA of America and tours across the globe in a working group to discuss the future of rules violations brought to their attention by viewers via phone calls, emails, and social media, in particular when it comes to penalties after a player signs a scorecard.
Topic number 2 for the working group. So they'll be addressing television call-ins, and then they'll also be addressing all issues related to scorecards, including should we have a close of round, essentially where you close off that scorecard and you can't go back in. Again, there are outcomes and implications that I think we all need to be sort of mindful of and make sure that we're aware of and accepting of and comfortable with before that suggestion could ever take place. But it's certainly something that we know has been discussed over the last few weeks, something we've discussed here, started to discuss with our partners, and will carry through into that working group.
We need to come up with a better answer than we have at the moment, and these are complex issues that need careful thought. Long way of saying, no, we have not set a specific agenda. We will do it as quickly as we can. We need to come up with a good answer, and that might take us a little bit of time.
Nice to get Trip Eisenhower's take. From a player's perspective, I don't know how many rules violations like some of what we've seen you've dealt with in person, but look, let's be honest, they're never going to make this perfect, right? The rules of golf are very complex. Do you think that they're taking a good initial first step?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I agree. I agree with Stacy that this is absolutely, there's a lot more cloudiness and subjectivity into how the committee can apply these rules. And I do know that the players usually, they never intend to breach these rules. Here's the thing, the Lexi ruling, and I think what needs to be dealt with in the future, and it's good news to hear the R&A and the USGA say, look, this was just step 1. We've got more steps to do, because I think the biggest reaction from the players and their standpoint was the fact that it was the next day on a different round, and the fact a viewer called it in. You talk to the players, and they're almost unanimous that the viewers should not be able to have an impact on the competition, and the solution to that is probably putting a rules official in watching the telecast, and therefore the rules official doesn't see it. Who cares what you see at home? I see traveling when I watch basketball. I can't call and change the impact of a game. The other thing is on the scorecards. Now here's where you talk to the officials and you talk to the R&A or the USGA, and they'll say, well, this is a competition from hole 1 to hole 72 that just happens in 18-hole increments. So we're going to look at the whole competition. If there's any unintentional breach of rules, you know, we're going to enforce them during that competition, whatever round it is. But the fact is, after 72 holes, unless it's an intentional rules violation that change the competition, they will not go back and change a score or anything after 72 holes. So my point is, why can't they do it from round to round? If the fact matter is they can't go back after 72 holes, they should not be able to go back and change after round 1 to round 2. After round 1 is complete, it is done, unless they find an egregious someone really purposefully trying to break the rules, then they will go back and change it after 72 holes, and I think they should be able to go back and change it from round to round. But going forward, that's the big one for me, and I think most of the players is the viewers should not really be able to change the course of the competition. It should be up to the officials and the players. And the other thing, round to round, if we can do it after 72 hole, we can do it after round 1, round 2, round 3, etc.
The good news is, though, in my opinion, after public outcries from players, fans, whomever, the rules of golf, the governing bodies, they're paying attention.
They are.
And they're trying to get it right.
And that's good news.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll continue to do that.
Exactly.
Lexi Thompson was on site at the Zurich Classic today, but declined to comment on the rules changes. She's in the field in the LPGA's Volunteers of America Texas Shootout this week. You'll hear her reaction tomorrow on Golf Central during a special news conference show starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Still ahead, it's an old tournament with a new twist. The Zurich Classic of New Orleans is now a team event. We preview some of the dynamic duos to watch. And while we're talking teams, we have a list you won't want to miss. A look at some of the best teammates in the history of the game. Where would these two be in your rankings? That's later on Golf Central.
Golf Central is brought to you by the Volke Design SM6 wedges. Progressive design, precision performance. Grip confidence, grip golf pride.